Coming up on today's show, Chris Veasey is an adventurer, non-traditionalist, and a lifelong storyteller. Despite his New York core and practical upbringing, Mr. Veasey packed his bags and walked away from it all for an entirely impractical hobo epic. After a lifetime of normalcy, the liberation taught him that living an unorthodox life is nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, this is where his newfound happiness stemmed from. Discovering that there is no direct correlation between playing it safe and contentment is what compelled Chris to write his first book, Uncivilized. The story he tells is one of non-conformity and trust in the universe, written as a hope that you too will be able to find your own unstuck self. Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where we hear inspiring stories, share actionable advice, and talk about the challenges and the joys of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm your host, Kitty Shambliss. Coming up, my conversation with Chris Veasey. Welcome back to Loving Without Boundaries, where I am here with Chris Veasey, who is the author of the book Uncivilized. And he also goes by Idaho Bones, if I have that correctly. And I'm really excited to have a lively conversation, which we've already started before we began recording. So thank you for coming on the show. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to getting to know you as well. And I've been listening to your podcast a lot lately. So I think I have an idea of what to expect. And it's always fun to listen to other episodes and be like, oh my gosh, that happened to me. Or
Yeah. Well, thanks for checking out the podcast. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable.
So cool. Thank you. So I've already shared your bio with everyone, but I'd love to just ask you to introduce yourself in a couple minutes in your own words.
Absolutely. So yeah, my name's Chris Veasey, but the name Idaho Bones did kind of follow me to the Appalachian Trail. So I thru hiked that entire trail in 2017, and that's kind of been like a midpoint of my adulthood, I would call it. So I grew up in New York, but once I was 18, I went to college in Washington, D.C., and I stayed in that area for 6 more years. So I was a true blue East Coaster, and I had managed to kind of save up some money, in the Appalachian Trail had always kind of been a nebulous dream of mine. So I went ahead and hiked that in 2017, and I always knew I was going to write every day. I'm a lifelong writer. I have 2 shelves in my basement of notebooks. I've just always been putting a pen to paper. And when I was out there, a story kind of presented itself, began to form. So I transcribed that book after the hike. And at that time, I had moved to Denver, Colorado, and met my wife shortly after moving here. So pretty much 2 weeks after moving here, I met her. So we've been together 6 years. I've been living out here 6 years, and I'm currently a videographer, primarily doing weddings. And then I'm also a teacher. And I've been doing all sorts of freelance and random work the last few years, but I'm happy to say I finally reached a place where I actually love my work. So.
That's awesome. Well, I have so many questions already, but one is, how did you meet your wife? Just curious.
Of course, we met on Bumble.
Okay.
I moved to Denver, and I very much, it's a funny story. So, I moved to Denver, and I had kind of seen people move to new cities, meet someone romantically, and just build their whole lives around someone. And then I'd seen it on the other side, where then the breakup happens, and then you're stuck with no friends. And on top of that, it's never been my personality to kind of do something like that. So I had made an absurd promise to myself and others to be single in Denver for a year before I even contemplated dating. And just a mere 2 lonely weeks later, I was, and then it was love at first swipe. I literally said, oh, fuck, when I saw her profile, because there was just a cosmic feeling in me that it was going to ruin my plans, so to speak. So we went on a date, and I was very nervous, but the conversation was flowing. She was looking beautiful. Everything was wonderful. And I, like a moron, blurted out, yeah, so I'm really not cut out for monogamy. I can never do it again. And she was like, okay. And I think that kind of stemmed from I did feel this kind of obligation to share that with people sooner than later. so as not to waste anyone's time. But I never intended to do it in the first 15 minutes of an excellent first date. But luckily for me, it worked out for everyone.
That's amazing. What an interesting story. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard from my podcast, but I met my husband on Match.com
Yeah, yeah.
many moons ago in 2003. And my other partner, who I've been with for almost 9 years now, I met him on
Wow.
OkCupid. So,
Oh yeah.
so I'm
Now,
a huge fan,
you
huge
know,
fan of online dating. I've never been
yes.
on Bumble, but I've had some clients who met their partners on Bumble. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked out.
So cool. So I'd love to just, I know you're familiar with my light bulb moment question. So I'd love to ask you just whether it was when you were younger or maybe as a young adult, like,
Sure.
was there either one moment or maybe a series of different moments where you realized that maybe you weren't cut out for monogamy or you were just a little bit different than the other kids, or what did that look like
Mm.
for you?
So yeah, and I was expecting this question and I wasn't sure how to handle it. And I'm like, I think I need to go back to the source, right?
Mhm.
And the thing that cracks me up is I was never like a girls have cooties kind of boy growing up. You know, I always thought they were so pretty and I wanted to be around them and I wanted them to pay attention to me. And so I had a little girlfriend in fourth grade, and then I realized on the last day of school, like it was summer and we never talked about what that meant because you're 9, you know, like anyway, but that summer, you know, so me and my sister, we had like a babysitter we were spend pretty much every day, and I would just wander around the neighborhood, and I met a girl who was like interested in me, more experienced than me, like just kind of, it's weird to like think about, let alone talk about, but it was basically just like, well, we didn't talk about that, and she's here, so you know, I kind of had like 2 girlfriends for a summer, I guess. And I never really, to be honest, I really never even thought about it. And then fast forward all the way to, you know, the first love of my life, you know, the girl I was dating at the end of high school, and I stayed with for another year after high school. And I mean, she was like everything to me, and I never felt any desire to be with anyone else. I never really had eyes for anyone else. And then you know, my freshman year, I was surrounded by a lot of temptation, and I was a good boy, didn't do anything. And then she was a year younger. She started college. She was already, you know, kind of feeling the squeeze of monogamy and stepping outside of it without my knowledge or consent at the time, and broke up with me a few weeks later. So it was kind of in a spurned state of affairs that I very quickly fell into my first of several slut phases in my sophomore year of college.
Got it.
um, Fast forward another few years, I kind of just would do this thing, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to this. I would just kind of sleep around for a while, have fun, meet someone that you know I thought was pretty incredible. And I think I realized a few times over that I was kind of carrying like this guilt of my periods of like sleeping around and being
Mhm.
promiscuous. And I would meet these like really, really good women who saw me as a really, really good man. And I would latch on to them. And inevitably within like 6 to 12 months, I would just kind of find my attraction waning and panic. And, you know, in that first relationship, it was like being with one person the rest of my life didn't scare me. Every subsequent relationship, it terrified me more and more.
Mhm.
So basically, you know, I had a few relationships. Fast forward again to shortly after college, and I was dating someone, and an old fling showed up to like a mutual friend's birthday thing and was just, you know, really, really making the moves. And we were walking to a bar, and she kind of pulled me into this alley, and I just completely caved. And it was like my first time ever violating the trust of someone I was with. And it was a surreal experience because you know, she was like begging me to come home, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come home with you. And then a cab came, and I just put her in the cab and ran away.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do. I was panicked. I was intoxicated. Of all people, I called my mother as I took a long walk home across the Key Bridge over to Arlington, Virginia.
Oh wow,
And
yeah.
I remember stopping on the bridge, looking out on the water, talking to my mother about how I just cheated on my girlfriend. And I was like, but I didn't want to stop. and like I still don't want to stop. Like I still like I don't know what to do. And that was at that point, it was like my second relationship where I was just like, I'm not cut out for this. So um we broke up shortly after that, dipped down into another slut phase. And
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of having these like really intrusive thoughts of like I shouldn't be with anyone ever again
Mm-hmm.
because I can't be faithful. And I don't ever want to be the guy cheating on someone. I don't ever want to be the guy, making someone feel so terrible. So I guess I'm just not meant to be with anyone. And I still kind of held that belief, but after a year and a half of that, I think I was in therapy, I was doing work. I don't know what I was thinking, but I entered another relationship, and I truly don't remember my mindset going into it, but I do remember we just found our, we were very open with one another. We were talking, and she said how she dated a girl in college, but she was too intimidated to like really go past a certain point physically. And I was like, well, if you want to do that, you know, with or without me while we're dating, we could definitely talk about and see what that looks like. And the more we talked, the more we realized we were actually aligned in, not finding strict monogamy to be the end all be all.
Mm-hmm.
Her having a great curiosity and exploring together at first, at least. And so we started doing that. And yeah, I guess there wasn't an aha light bulb moment until later. And I'll get to that in a moment. But at least in
Mm-hmm.
that relationship, it was still very much like feeling it out. And, we had multiple partners over the course of a couple of years. We went on this vacation to Brazil where the entire trip, like we were with this woman and like leaving her was actually really hard. And so it
Wow.
was just, everything was just changing slowly over time. The
Mm-hmm.
edges were just softening for me over the course of literally years. Um, and then she was supposed to hike the Appalachian Trail with me, actually. And she broke up with me. So I left my job, and then I lost my girlfriend and apartment all within weeks of each other. So
Oh, wow.
it
Yeah.
was it was just my life was completely flipped upside down. And I entered my my next slut phase, which was my no anchors time. And I would just talk to people about how freeing it was. Like for the first time in my life, I didn't have a job, I didn't have a lease, I didn't have a girlfriend. Like I could do whatever I want. And months later, I would go on to do exactly what I wanted, which was hike the Appalachian Trail. But that period was pretty wild. I had confided, like, so basically when that relationship ended, it was expressed that like I wanted more and she was feeling scared. And so it was
Mm.
kind of this opposing thing. And I wasn't trying to push. Like there are certainly a few moments I could think of where I wasn't my best self and I'm not proud of it. But I certainly wasn't trying to make her someone she wasn't and turn a relationship into something that scared her.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, we were going to these play parties in Washington D.C. And there's quite a big community there, as I'm sure you know. And
Yes, exactly.
well, and I was going, and I mean, just like eyes wide. Oh my gosh, there's a whole new world, and I want to be a part of it, and I don't want to. I don't want to be on the outside looking in. I don't want to be dipping my toes in. I want to dive in, and that's just not how she felt. So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it was only a factor in that breakup. And I confided in some other E&M and poly folks that I'd met when she and I were kind of exploring that. And, I said, I was like, I've been in contact with the girl we were seeing together and she wants to see me and I don't know what to do. And I kind of, I guess, had the right voices in my ear because it was basically just like, well, she broke up with you. So you kind of don't really have to follow any rules, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but I'd reached out to the woman we were seeing together. And then it was kind of just a few months of just like, what is going on for me? Like I in real time, I couldn't comprehend what was going on. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had women in my life that like I suspected might have been interested in me. And then suddenly it became very clear. And then I was like, all right, well, I just got out of a breakup. I'm in no mode to date. And I am like kind of seeing someone very casually. And it was like, yep, no problem. And it was just that over and over and over again, to the point where I was actually seeing like five people at once. I didn't have a job. I had all the time in the world. um, and,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just insane because it was like, well, then, two of them would be like, or, like what one was like, oh, well, do you, do you have like a photo of any of these women? And I showed, and she's like, oh, she's really pretty. Like, do you think she'd see us together? And I was like, I don't know. Let me ask. And then I did. And then it was like, sure enough, 3 nights later, we're all dancing and making out at a bar in downtown DC. It was like, it was just, my life had changed so fast, and I wasn't even sure like that it had turned into something I wanted, but it still showed me like, okay, there's so much I still don't know about. And I know you talk a lot on your podcast about the fact that like we're still going through a time where society is just starting to learn about us and what we do and what makes us tick. And I, like an idiot, I was calling my previous relationship polygamous, because I was like, well, it's not polyamorous, we're not loving other people, but it's not monogamous. So what's the other one? It's polygamous, right? And then people are like Mormons. I was like, no, like not like Mormons. And I was like, but I guess I don't know. Like,
That's funny. Yeah.
but it was just a crazy time. And then ultimately, and I'm so sorry, it's like the longest answer ever. On the
okay.
Appalachian Trail, I kind of had this aha moment where I was really wrestling with what to do with everything. Like I had left DC, I had left all those women on great terms. 2 of them were at my wedding, still talk to all of them.
Oh, wow.
But I was just wrestling with, where do I go from here? What do I do? How do I want the rest of my life to look? Because I've always wanted a family and all these things. And I just had this moment where I was like, I think I could just stay interested and really be happily married if like I marry a bisexual woman who is just constantly like checking out women with me, flirting with women with me, doing things without me, whatever. And I stopped, and I was in the middle of like a 20-mile hiking day, and I stopped and I go, oh fuck, I think I'm meant to be in a throuple. And it was just crazy. Like I'd never met one. I'd never, I'd like heard of it. And you see movies like Vicky Cristina Barcelona, and you're like, that's all you have. And, but yeah, spoiler alert, years go by, and I was in a triad for a couple of years.
Really? So you and 2 ladies?
Yes.
Okay. I asked probably because I live with 2 guys. So, cool. Well, that's amazing. Well, I mean, it's such a robust and flavorful and juicy story. Pardon the pun, but it is. But so I also just love that you're just honest and transparent about that. It's not sometimes black and white, some easy straight line. It can be, fraught with all kinds of twists and turns and mania and who am I and what am I doing and why am I here? So
yeah.
So I appreciate that honesty. So I'm curious, when you said that well, and also for our listeners, I want to say this, when you weren't sure if you were polyamorous or not, for our listeners, what I would describe that is polysexual, if you're familiar with that term. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but maybe you just didn't have that language at that time. Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious, when did you learn the word polyamory? That's always an interesting question.
Yeah, I did. And I was actually thinking about this because you talk about the ethical slut a lot on your episodes, obviously. And I think for a lot of us, it was a huge eye-opening read. And I can't remember. I do think it was before I hiked the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, okay.
I think it was like right before I hiked the Appalachian Trail. And I've read it a couple times. I'm also rereading Polysecure now. And yeah, once I had the term, I felt like an idiot.
Meaning like you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and even to this day, I've never really referred to myself as polysexual, not for any particular reason other than I'm kind of still discovering who I am and what I want. But yeah. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, that's okay. Well, I was asking, when you first heard the word, was it reading The Ethical Slut like it was for me, or did a friend say it to you, or did you learn it at one of the clubs that you went to?
Yeah, I was going to say, I definitely remember having some conversations with more established married couples at those DC swinger events, and who were not just E&M, but polyamorous, and them being, delights in terms of not minding me asking a million questions because I had them. So I definitely had heard about it, but the ethical slut was not just incredibly educational and eye-opening for me, but it was, and again, I think a lot of us go through this, it was very like validating
Mhm.
Because I did think, I know, and I know you've mentioned this, your guests have mentioned this before. I think we all go through a phase of feeling like there's something very wrong with us.
Mhm.
And I certainly did. And thankfully reading that book, it was just like between that, my kind of little five partner craziness. I got to come up with a phrase for that period of my life. 'Cause who knows? But and then hiking the Appalachian Trail and meeting even more E&M people, and I just kind of realized, okay, I guess because I always thought I'd either have to choose between like a great partner and non-monogamy, and I didn't think I could have both. I don't know if maybe there was some deep-seated like prejudice against people living that way or like some self-loathing for that, but I never thought I could have like a great partner, let alone several great partners, and not have to choose, yeah, monogamy for that.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad that you gave yourself permission to just go on that journey, both the journey through relationships as well as the Appalachian Trail journey, which sounds like it was
Mhm.
incredible for you.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, just in case they aren't familiar with the term E&M, that stands for ethical non-monogamy, just to make sure people know that. And also, I'm also curious because I live in Alexandria, Virginia. I've been to some of the clubs. And I'm sure we have some people in the DC area listening. What were some of the clubs that you were checking out?
So it was a, technically private group, but there was a strip club in DuPont Circle, that we used to like go to before like events and stuff, kind of
Oh,
like
okay.
yeah. And I can't remember. I want to say Crown Palace, but that doesn't sound right.
Oh,
I don't.
Camelot? Was it Camelot?
That one wasn't Camelot.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. Yeah, because
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
definitely there's definitely
Oh
some
my
different
gosh, yeah, I
clubs
guess
around the area.
Camelot is really close to DuPont Circle. I think it's on the other side. It's definitely a little more flavorful, spicy. I don't know.
A spicy
It's
club.
got more
Yeah.
carrot. It's less refined. Let's leave it
Hmm.
at that. But it's funny. I remember one event I went to. There was a who we thought was a couple. It turned out it was two coworkers just smashed from a company happy hour and then went to a strip club and then joined us for the after festivities. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it's like, yeah, if you find the place and you spend enough time there, maybe you'll get lucky.
That's funny. I'm actually not remembering the name of the club. It's just a super quick, funny story that
Sure.
when my husband and I were earlier on in our journey of practicing polyamory and open relationships, we went to a club down in DC and he still had his day job. He's not there anymore. And he definitely was not out to anybody in his work. And we walk into the club, and as we're putting our coats on the rack, I was like, "Those people look really familiar, and I can't figure out why."
Oh my.
And yeah, and I couldn't figure it out. And then finally, they started walking by, and as they walked by, I said to my husband, "We met them at your holiday Christmas party for work." So, once we realized that, we thought, let's just get ahead of this. So we just went up to
Yeah,
him and it's like,
yeah.
"Hey, what's up? Guess we're both here. Hello." And we ended up having a hoot of a time. But it's one of those funny moments when you're earlier on in your journey, you don't know maybe how to describe who you are and what you're doing, but you don't really have to worry about it in that case because we're all there at the same time.
Yeah.
So, you know,
And that's always because yeah, my wife certainly has concerns like that. And I'm always like, well, if they're there too, then cats out of there's two cats and there's two bags and they're both out. So what's the problem?
exactly. That's a great way to say it. It's a great way to say it. So I'd love to ask, like you mentioned some of the challenges, and I really love that
Wait,
vulnerable
hold on. Now I
story.
want to know what club you're talking about.
Oh, I'm having trouble
Mhm.
remembering the name, but when I
Yeah.
remember the name, I'm always happy to tell you, but I'm not trying to hide it.
Sure.
But I know it was down by U Street, in
Okay.
DC, but I can't
Yeah.
remember what the name of the club was. We're talking a long time ago.
Got it.
Um, but I'd love to ask, I was going to say, I really love the vulnerable share, and I'm picturing you like crossing Key Bridge, since I know it, calling your
Yeah.
mom and looking at the water and all of that. So you've shared some of the challenges that you had, but were there any other like big challenges that you faced once you started to realize a little bit more about how you identified and how you wanted to show up in relationships,
Yeah.
and how did you overcome some of those?
So I've actually been thinking about this a lot, especially in my reread of Holly Secure that talks about, and perhaps you can guide me a bit on this. I forget exactly how she phrases it, but kind of like ethical non-monogamy as an orientation. And I don't know if
Oh yeah.
NM is an orientation or what it is, but I think I've almost had a hesitancy to identify with it as an orientation. And I think the reason for this is, I've had a lot of, very educated and conscious people in my life kind of remind me of, my privilege and like I'm a, largely hetero-ish, mostly white male that, it's like there's a lot of privilege that comes with that. So I think in accepting that as part of my identity, I think I was reluctant to kind of take on an orientation that is like so unorthodox and kind of step out of that role of privilege. Not because I'm comfortable in my place of privilege. It almost feels like I don't deserve it. It's like,
Oh,
oh,
okay.
you have so many things going for you. Like life's so easy for you. Like, how could you say that it's so hard having that as an orientation? But I do, the more I've thought about it, it's like for a very long time, it has felt like that. It felt pretty much from the second person I had sex with right after that breakup, it was just like, I don't think I could ever be with just one person for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's certainly it's something that is like stuck with me. I think there's a reason I blurted that out in my first date with my wife. It's,
Yeah.
It has definitely become something that is part of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate this conversation, and I love Jessica Fern's work, and she's a friend of mine. And I love how that's where I first heard that as well. Like, is it an orientation or is it a choice? And there can be, even in my own Loving Without Boundaries community, I remember it was Pride Month, and an argument broke out online in my online community about this question.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to give you my take on it in case
Sure.
this helps you or anybody else. And it is related to what Jessica Fern teaches. And to me, like Jessica Fern talks about how when we orient towards something, the way I describe it is you realize that that's who you are, like in your DNA, in your makeup. Like it's part of your identity. And I
Mhm.
like to use the example of the way if somebody knows at whatever age, but often a young age, that maybe they're gay or maybe they're
Sure.
bisexual, and they just know that that's part of who they are.
Yeah.
And I've never heard anyone talk about privilege in that conversation, but I get it. But to me, that's a separate thing. Like you get to
Sure.
decide, in my opinion, you get to decide for yourself who you are and how you orient.
Mhm.
So for me, I feel that I am simply a polyamorous person. Like that's how I orient. And I also choose it, because I think there's still choice. Like
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
choose to
That's
practice
yeah,
polyamory, and because it takes work, right? It takes work to
definitely.
be ethical and consensual and have all the hard conversations. And the fight that had broken out in my group was
Yeah,
some
I'm so
people,
curious about it.
yeah, yeah. It was partly because it was Pride Month, and there's the LGBTQ plus, and so some of the argument was, well, what does the plus mean? Does that cover polyamorous folks? Does it not cover polyamorous folks? And the argument started where some people were saying that you can't orient towards that, like it's simply a
Mhm.
choice, and other people, including myself, were chiming in that, well, I beg to differ because I feel I am not actually even able to do monogamy. Like I've tried
Same.
for years and decades and it just didn't
Same.
work.
Yeah.
And I finally came to a place of self-acceptance that not only doesn't work for me, but I simply am a polyamorous person. So I have a belief that you get to decide for yourself how you orient. I
Yeah.
honor the conversation of privilege and like keeping that in mind.
Mhm.
But if you say you were gay, like would it
Mhm.
matter what color your skin was? If you're, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah,
Things like
100%.
that. Yeah. That's how I
Yeah, and
think
obviously
about it.
these are not
Yeah.
simple
No,
conversations.
they're not.
Yeah,
They're
very
not.
multifaceted, intersectional topics for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's just my view of it. But it also
Yeah.
aligns very much with what Jessica Fern talks about. Because she's just saying that for some people it could be more of a lifestyle choice that you
Sure.
can maybe dip in and out of based on where you are in your life cycle.
Yeah.
And that could be totally true for some people. But for other people, they may just feel like this is who I am, you know?
And that is how I feel. And
Yeah.
I think it was yeah, I think it was something I was like, for a number of reasons, hesitant to like truly step into. But yeah, especially upon rereading this one, I was like, well, I certainly couldn't do anything else. So it sounds like an
Yeah.
orientation to me.
Yeah, yeah. So, own it. But I love having these conversations because to me
Definitely.
it's also showing that you're very conscientious and respectful, and these are not easy black and white discussions.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and especially, when I see like, my wife, my friends, my partners like who are in the queer community and how being bisexual can be treated by like other members of that community, or how, just how hard it is being a woman. So I try to be conscious of that and not kind of
yeah.
present as like and I don't think of the orientation at all as like oh, this is my orientation and my life is harder because of it. It's just something I was, kind of, I felt like, do I deserve it?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of the statistics, but this community we're talking about, like the LGBTQ plus and folks in the consensual, non-monogamous, and polyamorous communities, I mean, we're all minorities. So,
Yeah,
I like to just say, like, hey, why don't we see each other and support each other, and remember that any type of minority is going to have some stigma or difficulties as they walk around the planet, with the other folks who are like, what's that?
definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I
I
agree.
agree.
So I'd love to understand more about going, like your decision to go on the Appalachian Trail and how that eventually led to your book. Tell me a little bit
Yeah,
more about that, your book, Uncivilized.
sure. Yeah, so the doing the Appalachian Trail, it was something that was like a dream as a child of mine, but it did kind of escape my consciousness for a bit. And I was a desk jockey for 6 years, and my girlfriend, whom I dated at the time, I refer to in the book as Erica. And so Erica she went to, a college that was close to the trail. So we would, go back and kind of hike the trail a little bit. And it brought it back to my like top of mind awareness. And at the time I was, you're in Washington, D.C., you know how it goes. I always call it the work till you drop mentality. The city of what do you do and who do you know? And I was kind of very entrenched in it. And it was really taking a toll on me. I was in a pretty toxic work environment and working, some weeks were normal hours, some were 90. And it was really taking a toll on me. And I kind of just realized this is not fulfilling me. It's not making me happy.
Mhm.
Um, I just felt stuck, really. And that felt like the quickest, somehow easiest, walking 2,200 miles with a giant backpack somehow felt like the easiest way to unstuck myself.
Mhm.
Um,
Certainly an interesting way
and
too.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was just kind of a culmination of not being satisfied with where my life was. And I've kind of had, a number of instances like that where I kind of try to change my life in a drastic way. And
Mhm.
yeah, none of them have stuck 100%, but they certainly shifted my canoe, as I like to say.
Wow. Yeah, it was certainly like a healthy way to do it, and I'm sure you must have learned a lot about yourself just surviving that, just going on
Definitely.
that adventure by yourself
And I had
mostly.
never
Yeah.
backpacked before.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I had never, I always say like I never pitched a tent outside a backyard, which isn't entirely true. It's funny. I thought that was true when I wrote the blurb for the book. And then I was like, oh, well, technically I would camp in like very designated spots. But I'd never been out in the wilderness the way you are, on the Appalachian Trail for sure.
Hmm. I'm envious of that, actually. It sounds like
Yeah.
an epic adventure. How long did it take you?
It ended up taking me 7 months. I had 2 weeks baked into the middle to go to an ultimate frisbee tournament and then hang out with my college buddies at a beach house, which for anyone listening, I do not recommend, because it was like having to develop my trail legs all over again, especially when you're just
Uh,
eating pizza and drinking beer for 2 weeks. And then I actually got Giardia as well, which set me back another 2 to 3 weeks. Plus, I was also not the most ambitious hiker. In the first half, I met because I went out there alone. As I said, I was supposed to do it with Erica, and that didn't happen. So I went out there by myself, and I was excited for the solitude. But I met two people that we kept seeing each other and vibing. So we hiked together for a long time, and they were not only in 1,000 miles better shape than I was, but they were very ambitious hikers. So they kind of kept me going at a pace that was just higher than what my default would have been. So I kind of took my time a little bit more in the second half of my hike, and also um, got Giardia and had to kind of reset again. So
Wow. Okay.
uh,
And so when did the light bulb for the book come? Like, tell me a little bit more about how
yeah,
that
and
trip
like going
played
out
together.
there, I kind of just thought I would write a book because I had this feeling like I was just going to have this magnificent adventure, and I did, and I
Mm.
really did. I mean, my first manuscript for this book was 1,000 pages. I clearly from this interview, I had brevity is not my long suit. And I mean, so much happened. I met so many people. I would write these, pages and pages of these descriptions of interesting people I would meet. Uh,
Wow.
and I just had no delusion after the fact of anyone wanting to read 1,000 pages written by a first-time author, me. So so I obviously had to cut it down, but I truly didn't know what the book was going to be about. And then I had these 1,000 pages of adventure but there was a lot in there. And I did grow up in a pretty violent, substance abusing environment. Now, I would never go so far as to just label my family that, and just leave it at that. Like, my parents are wonderful, balanced human beings, flawed just like the rest of us, but I'm very fortunate for how I grew up in my immediate family. And then, I have loving relatives on both sides. So this is not to say um, that I grew up in the most traumatic environment, but I did grow up around just normalized violence, verbal abuse, and alcohol and drug use as well. And I didn't really realize how like effective the Appalachian Trail would be in coming to terms with all that, and um, and it really was. It in a very roundabout and strange way. When I got Giardia, it meant I had to go 10 days without drinking, and I had kind of somehow always had whiskey on the trail, like always. Like I didn't think that would happen, and it kind of just did. And I was like, you know what? Let's make it an even 30. And the trail just kind of became what I call this gradual stripping away. Like when I got so into keeping up with those two friends and hiking, um, so many things fell by the wayside. Like, I came onto the trail, and like before that, I went through a period of having 5 sexual partners, like full transparency in all directions, but like obviously a very active sex life. And then I go out on the trail, and all of a sudden I'm not even thinking about any of that. And next thing I know, 6 weeks have gone by, and I haven't, let's just say I had a 6 week backlog. It's like and it was kind of crazy to me. And I was like, well, I wondered, Erica, I had confided in Erica that I told a previous girlfriend, like I thought I was a sex addict. And that was part of
Mm.
me figuring out where I lie on like the E&M spectrum.
Mm.
And then and I told her, I was like, yeah, I told my last girlfriend I thought I was a sex addict. But then the more I reflected on it, I realized I'm not a sex addict. I just desire to be with more than one person. That doesn't make you a sex addict. It just, obviously now I know what it makes you. And so she sent me a podcast while I was on the trail. It was like, you should listen to this, like no explanation or anything. And it was about a sex addict and, how he went and got help and all these things. And,
Mhm.
when I asked why she sent it or what it meant, or that I got no answers. So that was on my mind on the trail. And then
Mm.
6 weeks go by where, I haven't had an orgasm and I'm like, all right, well, that's not it. So then I keep walking and walking and walking. You have all this time to think. And, so you start thinking about the other things in your life you could do without. And, one of the big ones for me was violence. I definitely, again, grew up kind of seeing it normalized and seeing the aftermath be normal. Just kind of people pretending like fights didn't happen, things getting swept under the rug. So, I did a lot of reflecting on that. And then it was a matter of, once Giardia happened, I was like, well, let's keep stripping away. Like, I want to see what's underneath all these layers.
Wow.
And so that's why I told myself, I was like, I've been drinking way more than I thought I would on the trail. I don't think it's like outrageous. Obviously, I've hiked 1,500 miles. It's not like I'm sitting on a couch getting wasted, but still, let's see how 30 days without it goes. And it just got me thinking. And it took me to this book called The Craving Mind, which I was not expecting it. I thought it would be like very scientific, data driven, and I don't know. I don't really know exactly what I was expecting, but it was so much about Buddhism. So then that book, and I'd always been interested in Buddhism, but I got the false advertising young in life of life is suffering being the motto of Buddhism, and I was like, well, that sounds emo as fuck. So I kind of stayed away from it. And so this book was so about it. And he referred to Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, which is, obviously a well-renowned book. So then I consumed that book, and then I consumed another book. And ultimately where I'm going with all of this is I got back from the Giardia episode, and I was just so grateful to be back on the trail, but things were still eating at me. It was still like, who am I in general? Who am I in terms of what kind of partner can I show up as? What kind of husband am I going to be? Can I be with one person? Do I have to be with one person? All these things. And then it's, examining my relationship with alcohol. And then it became my bank account was in the, there were three digits in my bank account, then two. And it was just a culmination of just almost too much reflection, and then panicking and stressing, living too much in the past, living too much in the future. And it literally culminated in, I was about to do this big climb, and I took a few hits of marijuana. I started hiking this big climb, and I didn't even realize it, but I just wasn't breathing right. And from my mom, I inherited a propensity to faint. So I kind of recognized the signs pretty quick, but I was starting to faint actually right there on the Appalachian Trail. And I just got this idea in my head of like, if I stop, if I faint, if I do any of that, I'm not going to finish the trail. I'm a complete failure. Everything I've done until this point is meaningless, blah, 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 blah. And this, and my vision went, my hearing went, and I heard a pop in my own brain.
Whoa.
And I managed to like put my arm out and fall to the ground somewhat softly. I'd gotten my pack off at some point, and I awoke roughly 5 minutes later with a leaf like just at the center of my head, just at perfect rest. And I opened my eyes, and everything looked different. Everything sounded different. Everything felt different. And I started watching the leaves fall from the trees. It was fall was coming on fast at that point. And I was just absolutely mesmerized by like all these leaves falling in circles around each other, and how beautiful it was, and how beautiful life is. And immediately my old self-critic came and was like, this happens every fall and you've never noticed it before. What's wrong with you? And then another voice that was completely unrecognizable said, shh, relax, breathe. And this voice started guiding me, and it guided me to an outlook about a mile down. And my inner self-critic kept trying to talk to me the whole walk to the outlook. I didn't know where I was going, but this voice said, you're going somewhere. Just keep walking. And I go to this outlook, and there's this beautiful hill, and it's like it's cultivated in different ways, and like you can tell that someone is actively cultivating this land, and it was just like so perfect. And I sat down and I said, I'm not leaving till I've truly looked at this hill, at every piece of it. And I start looking at it, and my mind starts wandering, and then I see myself walking up the hill even though I'm 2,000 feet above it, and I just go into a trance, and the next thing I know, everything just clicks, and my eyes are closed, and I can start feeling colors like around me. And the more research I did afterwards, and as years go by, it felt like a natural like chakra alignment, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Where I've read several other like spiritual leaders going through this. Like Eckhart Tolle is one who his experience of achieving his version of enlightenment sounded exactly like what I went through. Like he was in extreme turmoil. His body just shut itself down, and he woke up and he was like, the birds chirping was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was like everything to a T. So naturally you want to chase something like that, right? But I sat there in just pure bliss for about 10 minutes before like other hikers started to come, and the yellow jackets start swarming me, things like that. But long story short, it was just I think I knew that had to be part of the book, but I still came out of the trail with this story that I just didn't know what it was about. It was like, and spoiler alert, I'm actually writing another book called Unattached. So it's uncivilized on it, because there was a lot of E&M polyamory stuff in Uncivilized, and it was just too long. And then after working with my editor, it just felt like it wasn't the main part. And by the way, for anyone listening, like there's tons of one smut. There's some really graphic sex scenes in Uncivilized, if that's your speed. There is a ton of ethical non-monogamy talk and, like researched beliefs and debates and things like that. And it is a major theme of the book, but it wasn't like the theme. And I had all these pages and pages of what I was doing in DC and like what I felt like in those relationships. And someone finally told me, it sounds like you're writing several books. So I just, so I came out of it, and it felt important to tell the story of kind of going into it, just being this angry, resentful person, kind of finding peace and acceptance, with my life, with my choices, with the people around me. And really it became a motivation of like, I say all the time, like I want everyone to go find their Appalachian Trail. And I know it's not going to be a 200-mile walk, but it does feel like, we live kind of a fear-based life at times. It feels like everybody feels stuck in some way. So I wrote Uncivilized to just kind of help people see that, like, taking the leap works out more often than not. I learned to trust my gut for the first time. And that's what I think anyone, and a lot of people who have read the book said that, it's already inspired people to kind of go out and take a chance. And again, maybe it's not something where you quit your job and go move into the middle of the woods. Maybe it's not something where you quit your job at all. Maybe it's something you can achieve while working your job without leaving your family, things like that. I think I just wanted to write the book and show people that you're not stuck.
Wow. That's really amazing. I'm sure people will resonate a lot and relate to what you shared there and be hanging on the edge of their seat like I was just listening to you describe that. You did such a great job.
Thank you.
Amazing. So who would you, if you had to describe it, who would you say that the book Uncivilized is for? Just, I don't want to put words in your mouth. How would you describe that?
Yeah, I think, it was tricky. It's like I dedicated it to my parents and my wife, and those feel like true dedications. And I almost feel like with my parents, like I felt bad because I was going through some resentment I was holding towards them when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, and I really, thank goodness, was able to leave that. And one of the first slogans for the book was like, burying anger on the Appalachian Trail without leaving a trace. One, it's too long. Two, it's not really what the book's about. It wasn't about shedding anger. Any Buddhist will tell you can't do that. You just have to change your relationship with it. But it was almost like I dedicated the book as like almost an I'm sorry to them. Like, I'm sorry if I don't make you look great at times. Like, I love you. You're great people. I think the sex scenes alone make it hard for them to read the book. So not just all the family trauma as well, having to read it. And then of course for my wife, I mean, she's an inspiration to me every day. And on top of that, like really helped make the book happen. I mean, supported me financially a few times, but also kept me going and let me run ideas by her, and is an incredibly successful and creative person. So I think just has a lot of good insight and helped it turn into what it is. But as cheesy as it sounds, I mean, the book really is for everyone. And I know maybe that's one of the reasons I haven't picked up an agent, because when they ask you, who's this book for, they don't want to hear everyone, because you can't sell to everyone. They need a target market. They need a target demographic. But I truly think everyone can pick this book up and take something away from it and start living a little differently. I think I've just felt, especially, after the pandemic, like we're all just kind of carrying this almost melancholia a little bit. And I think everyone's just kind of feeling the squeeze and pain in the world, which, is like impossible to not. And I just want everyone to go out and take care of themselves and do something they've always wanted to do. And again, maybe it's not the full picture. Like, maybe you wanted to be a figure skater and it's just not going to happen. Like your body won't allow it, or, you've got all these obligations, but find what's going to bring the fulfillment of that into your life. And because it is possible. And I think people forget that. I think we often think it's too late, or that's not for me, or I can't leave my family behind. If you have the right relationship with your family, they'll want you to go out and do something like that. So I think everyone can afford to kind of get that reminder that they can take leaps of faith without losing everything.
That's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to share in terms of maybe like either a parting message or anything that I didn't ask you?
Oh man, you really put me on the spot there. I was expecting you to ask me more questions. No, I think it's just like I'm truly proud of this book. And I think it's hard because it's been a matter of not quite having the time, and also something standing in the way of me truly getting it out there to the amount that I would like. And it's not that I want to be a New York Times bestseller or be a millionaire. It's that I truly think this book could improve the lives of so many people. Like I really think it's a compelling story, and I think anyone who reads it can kind of develop some self-compassion for themselves and for others. I mean, that's one thing I talk about in Uncivilized is meeting people that, just completely reading their book by the cover. I wanted no part of that book, and then they would go on to show me incredible kindness and selflessness. And, so I think we could all benefit from just humanizing each other more, giving the gifts to ourselves of taking chances and saying yes to things that have kind of been burning inside of us, and we're just quietly putting that fire out. I hate to tell you, it's never going to go out, so just let it burn. And people are afraid to do that. So yeah, I mean, go check it out. Read uncivilized.com is the best place to get the book. Of course, it's also on Amazon and in some bookstores as well. But it would just mean the world to me. And I, believe me, there are parts of that book where I'm like, people are not going to be happy about that part. I welcome it, please. I mean, I spend so much of the book talking about my lifelong struggle with, am I truly a good person? And, the Appalachian Trail kind of really sent me almost 100% along the way of figuring that out. And I don't think everybody struggles with that. And I think that's good. I think some people could do with asking that question a little bit more candidly.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite lines in the book is, no villain eyes a scoundrel in the mirror after all. And basically it just means like, villains don't see themselves as villains. And but what really brought it full circle was, reading yet another piece recently where there's I can't believe I'm not remembering the book or the author. I really should have a list here. But, I think what brought it full circle for me was this well-known Buddhist teacher wrote a book, and he said, peace doesn't come from hiding or running from anything. It comes from acknowledging that within all of us, there's a murderer. Within all of us, there's a rapist. Within all of us, there is, like the list goes on of deadly sins that, we all could be committing. And it's the second you recognize that, and then you recognize, oh, well, since I haven't done those things, there is a great warrior inside of me, becoming like the best version of myself. And it kind of just made me realize that was almost without meaning to, like, it was something I like knew all along and I was fighting. And it was something that I realized like really shined through the book before I even learned it for myself.
Wow. Really amazing. Yeah, it sounds like what a journey, like your life journey, then the Appalachian Trail journey, and then birthing this book with another one coming out after that. Really, really inspiring. So, and thanks for already sharing with our listeners where they can find you and your work. I've
Oh my gosh,
absolutely,
yes.
yeah, loved our conversation. You're very easy to
Hey,
talk to.
thank you.
And I just want to, thank you for your time and the gift that you've given the world by putting this out there.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, I'd love to be back. And for anyone listening, like, please reach out. I love waxing philosophical, and I challenge any and all objections, criticisms. I'm quite literally an open book. So
Very cool. And I assume they folks can reach out to you at your website, the uncivilized.com website. Is that right?
readuncivilized.com.
Oh,
Yep.
readuncivilized.com. Thank you for
Yeah, and then I'm also on both Instagram and TikTok, Chris Veasey with two Y's, ChrisVeasey.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your attention and this beautiful gift to the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard, are struggling with some aspect of your relationships, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit to work with me as your relationship coach, here's what I invite you to do next. Head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. That's lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply, and book a call to speak with me. I'll get on the phone with you for about 45 minutes, and we'll get you crystal clear on 3 things. Number 1, exactly what's not working well in your relationships right now. Number 2, ideally where you'd like to be and what might be getting in the way. And number 3, the exact strategy to get you there, helping to close that gap. Remember, creating healthy, open relationships does not typically happen by itself. Many often need expert guidance to make it happen. We've helped clients all over the world to feel safe, happy, and secure in open relationships, while not losing their mind or their cherished partners. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. I'm Kitty Chambliss, and let's talk soon.